That is the presentation from the the Secretary General Uganda National Commission for UNESCO. Thank you so much. The message was deep. The contents were real about the upheavals facing journalism in Uganda. And those joining us online, if you've just joined the conversation we're having today, it's integrated across generation public dialogue on information as a public good. And part of the topics we're going to discuss today, part of those, it's media freedom, the new economic challenges faced by the media sector, the role of internet companies, plus transparency and the media and the information literacy. Ladies and gentlemen, those here with us and those wherever you're watching from, I want to remind you that COVID-19 is real and keep the tweets coming in. The hashtag is World Press Freedom Day, and you also give us another hashtag that is Stand for Human Rights. Without any further ado, like we say, the time is of essence. Allow me to welcome the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Designated Official for Security, Her Excellency Rosa Malango. Round of applause for her.
Good morning, everyone. Uganda is among the top 10 producers of coffee. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. There we go. First of all, I want to say thank you to the administrators of the Hub. It's my first time being here, so it's pretty impressive, and I look forward to coming back to better understand the services that it offers to everyone. So I will be making my remarks on behalf of the United Nations system and the United Nations Secretary General. So to the representative of the Minister of ICT and National Guidance, the acting chairperson of the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, the country representative of United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for Uganda, the president of Uganda Journalists Association, distinguished representatives from the government ministries, agencies, and departments, representatives from the private sector, civil society, the Youth Coalition for SDGs, of course the media, it's your day. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. On behalf of the United Nations and Uganda, I am delighted to be part of the national commemoration of World Press Freedom Day. So let me begin by expressing our solidarity with all journalists and renewing our commitment to work with journalist associations, media organizations, the government, development partners, and civil society towards a safe and secure working environment for journalists in the country. I wish to commend the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, the United Nations Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the Youth Coalition for SDGs, who have been recently undertaking trainings with journalists across the countries, and whose collaboration is being reflected in today's integrated cross-generational public dialogue on information as a public good. It is my hope that we will soon witness the formal appointment of a new chairperson for the Ugandan Human Rights Commission so that it can resume its full functions at national and international levels. So ladies and gentlemen, a word about why is freedom of the press important. World Press Freedom Day was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in December 1993, following a recommendation from UNESCO's General Conference. The suggestion to establish World Press Freedom Day on an annual basis on the 3rd of May was made by journalist at Windhoek, as mentioned before. Today, we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Windhoek Declaration for the development of a free, independent, and pluralistic African press. Despite the dramatic changes in the media over the past 3 decades, this declaration's urgent call for press freedom and free access to information is as relevant as ever. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has given way to a misinformation pandemic, and this has raised further the importance of press freedoms. According to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his Press Freedom Day message, he notes as follows: the global challenges we have faced during the COVID-19 pandemic underline the critical role of reliable, verified, and universally accessible information and saving lives and building strong and resilient societies. He also notes that during the pandemic and in other crises, including the climate emergency, journalists and media workers help us navigate a fast-changing and often overwhelming landscape of information while addressing dangerous inaccuracies and falsehoods. Free and independent journalism is our greatest ally in combating misinformation and disinformation. I urge all governments to do everything in their power to support a free, independent, and diverse media. End of quote. At this time, when countries around the world, including Uganda, are focused on socioeconomic transformation, renewable energy, as well as peace and security, freedom of the press must be recognized for its vital role in informing citizens about public affairs, monitoring the actions of government at all levels, and ensuring a constructive social compact between citizens and the state on both their rights and responsibilities. Freedom of the press has a new dimension resulting from the evolution of the media and technology. With the emergence of citizen journalism, we must also address the need to avoid misinformation, incitement, and hate speech in the name of public information. We need to look into the financing streams for traditional and new media platforms to ensure that the freedom to convey the facts does not become subject to patronage. Without a free exchange of information, people cannot meaningfully participate in the positive transformation of their communities, their nations, and democracies. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have an opportunity to remind the government of its duty to respect and uphold the right to freedom of expression as enshrined in Article 29 of Uganda's Constitution, which states everyone shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression, which shall include the press and other media. This is also enshrined in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which underscores that freedom of expression and access to information are fundamental human rights guaranteed by Article 9 of the African Charter. And we can also find this enshrined in Article 19 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the Sustainable Development Goal 16, Target 10, which says to ensure public access to information and protect fundamental freedoms in accordance with national and international legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, we also have an opportunity to remind ourselves that we have a shared responsibility to exercise our rights without infringing on the rights of others. We can agree that freedom of expression is the foundation of many other rights and gives both individuals and communities the right to articulate their opinion without retaliation, fear of retaliation, intimidation, censorship, or punishment. Now, before I conclude, a word on shared responsibility. The Global 2030 Agenda and its SDGs, they mark a paradigm shift towards a more transformative model for sustainable development, aiming to secure freedom from fear and freedom from want without discrimination. This means that the SDGs encompass a promise by all countries on earth to pursue a more peaceful, just, and inclusive society, which are free from fear and violence. Uganda is currently faced with the impact of COVID-19 on the social and economic situation of the most vulnerable, the impact of climate change on the frequency and scale of natural disasters, and the impact of rapid population growth on the need to improve participation of the youth in the economy. But it's also dealing with the impact of increasing incidents of excessive force and corruption on the population. We must promote peace, justice, and strong institutions if we are to encourage innovation, support development, and promote adherence to the standard operating procedures against COVID-19 by everyone. We need to enhance accountability, promote transparency, and develop a new code of citizenship. And we can begin by identifying positive cultural values and universal principles, promoting the concept of Ubuntu. We need to empower people to seek accountability for the implementation of the SDGs as a collective responsibility. Dear media professionals and citizen journalists, you inform the public about the current affairs, and you influence opinion on a daily basis at both national and global levels. You are the first-line stakeholders in bringing the SDGs to life, closer to the people, the Wananchi. So I invite you to use the SDG targets to interrogate national policies, strategies, and initiatives, to explore inefficiencies, accountabilities, and impact. This is a universal pathway to interrogate modalities of implementation, raise concerns about violations, and make suggestions on corrective actions. The SDGs give us an opportunity for government entities as well, those responsible for law and order, to review performance, identify constraints, and commit to make improvements. In this vein, I want to recognize a good practice. I wish to recognize the District of Wakiso for being the first district in Uganda to issue a human rights report, which was done on 28th April this year. This is an important step to improve the relationship between citizens and the police by providing a framework for accountability and a discussion on performance, incidents, and solutions. I encourage other districts to emulate this good practice by Wakiso District, and I thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for supporting this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot conclude today without a moment of recognition. The World Press Freedom Day has its roots in both the SDGs, international law, universal values, and in Africa. I therefore call upon media owners, editors, citizens, and journalists to espouse the values of Ubuntu Mulamu, particularly Obumu, unity, Obuesimbo, integrity, Ubwedofu, transparency, and Okufayo, empathy. These must be at the center of our efforts as we focus on eliminating poverty, facilitating good governance, sustaining peace, promoting prosperity, and protecting the planet we all call home. On behalf of the United Nations system, I wish to convey my profound regrets and my concerns to the media fraternity for all of you who have incurred incredible pain during the past year while carrying out your work. In particular, I want to recognize Ashraf Kasire, who was injured in the line of duty in December 2020. I call on the government and media owners to work together to improve the welfare of journalists, to ensure their protection, and to support those affected by excessive use of force in the line of duty by creating a trust fund to cover health and other related expenses. No journalist should lose their life or their health while pursuing the public good. Accountability, reconciliation, and corrective action are key to rebuild trust in governance systems. There are still simmering tensions. There are still people looking for answers. There are others spreading misinformation, hate speech, and incitement. Intolerance and abuse are rising on social media platforms and spilling into our communities and our homes. We must not take the peace in Uganda for granted as we continue on the journey towards sustainable development. In this context, allow me to take this opportunity to recognize some of the journalists in Uganda who have played a significant role in contributing to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals and the universal values they represent. We have issued for you certificates of recognition to convey our gratitude for your sacrifice and for being an inspiration. I am asking my colleague Michael, who's supposed to be around here somewhere, and my colleague, the country representative of OCHR, to please be ready to hand this over as I read the names out. The first journalist to be recognized, Mr. Gerald Tenwaya from New Vision, a veteran environment journalist with a New Vision and a mentor to young journalists. Environment reporting is seen by many journalists as abstract and boring. Gerald, you have persisted in your pursuit of SDG 13 on climate action, and by doing so, please come out to get your car. By doing so, you have inspired young journalists, including during the training organized by the Youth Coalition. A round of applause for this champion. There you go, the COVID punch. And stand there with your certificate. Gerard, you have inspired a new generation of youth journalists who are going to promote climate change. Thank you. The second journalist to be recognized as a champion is Mildred Tuhaise from NBS. A seasoned news anchor and reporter with NBS TV, she has shared her experience with students of journalism at universities, inspiring many future journalists. She has mentored many journalists over the years, focusing on SDG 5 on gender equality. She's a mentor of the Youth SDG Coalition and a source of inspiration to many young women. Thank you, Mildred, for being an inspiration. The third journalist we are recognizing today is Ernest Kivumbi from HICGI News Agency. Ernest is young. He has an online articles with which he has consistently raised awareness about SDGs, focusing on SDG 13 and 16. He has consistently supported the Youth Coalition for SDGs and demonstrated that the youth are stakeholders in development. Congratulations, Ernest. You are known for your professionalism and for your passion. Well done. Let's grab that moment there. Ms. Jocelyn Nakibule, Spark TV. She has reported well-researched, informative stories about human rights, gender equality, and peace in pursuit of SDG 5 and SDG 16. She has kept her audience interested in critical issues and has dedicated her work to amplify the voice of the voiceless. She remains an inspiration to many. Congratulations. Thank you very much. And then last but not least, I know he will be able to make it, we have Ali Mivule from NTV, who has championed reporting on the well-being of refugees and host communities, democracy, and human rights, bringing into focus SDGs number 1, SDG 3, SDG 10, and SDG 16. He is dedicated to work. He's an advocate for peace, and we really want to recognize your bravery, having been injured in the line of duty. Thank you for your professionalism. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, a short reminder that nationhood is a challenging journey. It requires regular exchange of views on values, codes of conduct, and aspirations across the whole of society. Sustaining peace, justice, human rights, and development is a shared responsibility because they are common goods. We must place equal attention on identifying breaches of trust, as we do on disciplinary action and on recognizing good practices. On behalf of the United Nations in Uganda, I reiterate our commitment to continue working with the journalists, students of journalism, the government, development partners, civil society, and media organizations towards the implementation of Uganda's vision, the NDP 3 targets, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Through the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework in Uganda, we will work beside you from now until 2025. I conclude with a quote from Nelson Mandela, who once said, "A critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy." Thank you for your attention.
Round of applause again for Her Excellency Rosa Malango. Indeed, the conversation, the words you've made here are remarkable. Round of applause for our colleagues who have won certificates from the UN. You've really done tremendously. I congratulate you upon that. As the world is celebrating this day, the 30th anniversary of this occasion, today is a reminder to governments of their international obligations and commitments to respect and protect the freedom of expression, including for journalists and media workers online and offline. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, allow me to welcome our guest of honor, who is a very humble man, the PS from the Ministry of Information and ICT, Mr. Vincent Bajire, to join us up here. Round of applause. This is our PS. The PS represents the minister who has gone for cabinet. In your absentia, Mr. PS, our president of UJA, Mr. Matthias Rukundo, alluded to the security brutality we face as journalists. He alluded to wages or payments as journalists. He again emphasized something to do with arrests and incarceration. These are issues government needs to come and give a position on what is being done. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, those who have just joined us online, the hashtag is World Press Freedom Day, and I'll pick your hashtag, and the other hashtag you can use is Stand Up for Human Rights. 4 is a 4, a digit 4, human rights. I'll pick your tweet and I'll read whatever you're saying about such a day. Without any further ado, allow me invite the acting chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Dr. Katebalirwa Moti, to give us a presentation, and thereafter he will invite our guest of honor to give us his submission. Amoti.
Thank you very much, the coordinator of the function. I think allow me to remove this so that it can be audible enough. I will stick to a prepared speech in the interest of time. The PS Ministry of ICT and the National Guidance, representing the Honorable Minister of the same ministry, other government officials present here, Your Excellencies, heads of foreign missions present here, all of you in your respective capacities, distinguished development partners, representatives of security agencies who are here, members of the media fraternity, heads of partner organizations, all the panelists who have agreed to grace this occasion, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to add my voice to the previous speakers to welcome all of you to yet another annual event when Uganda joins the rest of the world to commemorate the World Press Freedom Day. And allow me to say from the onset that we don't take your gesture for granted. This day is important because, as you've already been told, it was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in 1993 under the landmark Windhoek Declaration on Media Pluralism and Independence 30 years ago. The World Press Freedom Day is therefore marked globally today as a reminder to governments around the world of the need to respect their commitment to press freedom, and also as a day of reflection among media professionals about issues of press freedom and professional ethics. It is also a day of remembrance for those journalists who lost their lives in the cause of their duty. World Press Freedom Day is also a day of support for the media to attain genuine media freedom. Permit me on behalf of the Uganda Human Rights Commission and its partners to thank our guest of honor, the Honorable Minister of ICT and National Guidance, Honorable Judith Nabakoba, in a special way, who had accepted to personally grace this occasion, but because of a very heavy schedule of duties today, she called us and told us it has been very difficult for her to keep to her promise, but she has sent us a representative. And I thank the representative, the PS. Thank you very much for coming. Today's event, dubbed the Integrated Cross-Generation Public Dialogue, is the crowning of the week-long joint activities held by Uganda Human Rights Commission and its partners, namely the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Uganda Journalists Association, Uganda Parliamentary Press Association, Uganda Journalists Union, Human Rights Center Uganda, and Uganda Media Women Association, among others. The Commission and its partners have in the past week carried out the joint activities under this year's global theme, which is information as a public good. These activities include mindset training for field-based journalists on climate change, which was held in Soroti and Gulu. A public dialogue for journalists, also in Gulu, and a media advocacy campaign. This year's theme serves as a call to renew the global commitment to freedom of expression, press freedom, and freedom of information, while at the same time acknowledging the new economic challenges faced by the media sector, the gatekeeping role of internet companies, and their need for greater transparency, as well as the strong need for media and information literacy capacities to be strengthened not only in Uganda, but worldwide. Uganda has guaranteed the right to freedom of expression and press freedom. As you know, this is done under Article 29, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution of Uganda, which is a big step in the right direction. As we reflect on the journey that we have walked as a country with regard to the human rights agenda, today we recognize that in spite of some challenges, the country has over the years made great strides in advancing media freedom. This is evident in policies such as the liberalization of the media, which has seen the number of media houses grow in this country, an elaborate legal regime, and the advent of the digital era, among other developments. Media reports have also, on a number of occasions, assisted us at Uganda Human Rights Commission to follow up on or monitor incidents with human rights implications which we have handled and will continue to handle, including complaints of violation of media freedom. We have, however, as a country, regrettably experienced some drawbacks, such as incidents of violence against journalists while on duty by some overzealous individuals, continued application of some unfavorable and archaic laws, as well as growing irresponsible use of the social media, to mention but a few. Today's commemoration reminds us of our duty as a country to strive to entrench an understanding and appreciation of the pivotal role played by the media in facilitating the realization of the right to information as a public good. It is therefore our call today to all the relevant stakeholders to strive to ensure that there is a conducive environment for effective media practice in this country, Uganda. We therefore call for the observance and respect of the rights of journalists as partners, journalists as partners in deepening democracy and sustainable development in this country through their noble profession of providing information as a public good. I must, however, also hasten to add that just as it is for every human right, media freedom comes with duties and responsibilities. In fact, the duties of media and the practitioners are specifically provided for in international human rights standards, requiring them to observe maximum professionalism, also barring them from using hate campaigns and from promoting violence. Today, we come together to again raise our voices as human rights defenders in continuing to advocate for media rights, but also call on them to fulfill their duties and obligations so that the power that the media wields is not abused, but is used to build our country constructively, to build the people of Uganda, to build peace in Uganda, to build harmony in Uganda, and to promote the respect for human dignity for all. Today we acknowledge that a lot still needs to be done to ensure full respect of press freedom and media practice in our country. It is the responsibility of all of us to ensure that we enhance the respect for these rights. Also, fulfill our duties and obligations as rights holders, and ensure that we consolidate the achievements made by shunning retrogression on the aspects on which we have scored successes. Permit me to restate that on our part, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which has the constitutional mandate to protect and promote human rights, will continue to receive and investigate complaints of human rights violations including the violations against the rights of journalists. We will also continue to carry out continuous, periodic, human rights-based approach training for journalists and hold periodic engagements with editors, media owners, and regulators with the view of advancing media freedom in Uganda. A few minutes ago, I talked to the president of Uganda Journalists Association. We have agreed to meet soon to revive the collaboration we had established in the past, but which broke off, so that one of the things we are going to stress is training of journalists. The Commission and its partners are therefore certain that today's panel discussion on the topics that have been carefully selected will generate the desired debate and subsequent resolutions that will contribute to building blocks for strengthening media freedom in Uganda. Permit me on behalf of the organizers to say a special thank you to our distinguished panelists who have offered to share their cross-generational perspectives on various issues concerning media freedom and the media sector in general in this country. As I conclude, allow me on behalf of the partner organizations that have jointly organized today's commemoration to extend our sincere gratitude to the government of Uganda, the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the National Commission for UNESCO, who have offered financial support for this commemoration. I wish you fruitful commemorations, but at the same time, I would like to remind us all that media freedoms are critical for our freedom of expression and enjoyment of other rights as human beings. I therefore urge all of us, to embrace our responsibility to safeguard and enjoy our rights.
Thank you very much, the Master of Ceremonies, the Chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Her Excellency, the Resident Coordinator or Resident Representative, Coordinator, the Resident Coordinator of the UN in Uganda, the Uganda Journalists Association, I wonder whether Charlie Impa, you're still the chair, or you were retired in a public interest. Representatives of the development partners here present, colleagues from government, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, a good afternoon to you all. First, I'll start by acknowledging and thanking the sponsors of this event, the organizations. I may not be able to read all of them, but I think the banners are very clear. I really want to thank them and appreciate them for all their efforts in making this event happen. I'll also take the opportunity, because I might forget, and this is very important, to congratulate the journalists that have just been awarded certificates, to say thank you for all the good work that you're doing in disseminating information to the public. The theme for this year is information as a public good. And I think it's extremely appropriate because, indeed, information serves a number of purposes. There is information to keep us informed, but there is also information to empower us as citizens, as human beings, for our own well-being. And indeed, through your practice, the press, the journalists, the work that you do, you serve both purposes. You inform, but also empower. And in that respect, as the government of Uganda, you may not believe it, but you respect your profession. We respect the profession of the press, the profession of journalists. I see Andrew laughing, but I mean it. We do respect, and it is for that reason that we have made deliberate interventions as government, both from an enabling environment viewpoint and also to ensure that we have as many platforms as possible. And it's because of the platforms that government has allowed that indeed we are in a position to stand here and talk about press freedom. Because there are not so many countries with over 340 FM stations. There are not many. And especially for a country the size of Uganda. We have in excess of 40 television stations. I stopped counting the online practitioners because every other day there is one that is coming up, and all that is good. It comes with challenges. They are not easy to regulate, largely because you may get information in the comfort of your bedroom. I've spoken about the need for responsible journalism, the need to indeed verify, and especially receiving news on our gadgets. Beyond that, of course, there are all the efforts to ensure that internet connectivity goes to as far to as we have had discussions with all the stakeholders as the Ministry of ICT. We have engaged the media itself. We have engaged our colleagues in security, and I would have expected that beyond the prisons, who are our custodians after committing a crime or before they prove that we committed a crime, our colleagues from police would be here, and maybe our colleagues from the UPDF. But having said that, we have had a number of discussions with them, and I agree and I'm in agreement that training must be on both sides. It would be counterproductive to just train the journalists to meet their part of the bargain without indeed having training for the people you interface with, such as security, in the process of implementing or performing your responsibilities. So friends, the media fraternity, mine is to commit that as a ministry responsible for with we are found wanting. Indeed, the doors are open to come and we discuss, because we don't work in isolation. But we are human, we make mistakes, but we must commit and work together to ensure that the mistakes are completely minimized for the good of the profession. On the issue of our wages, it is true we have received a couple of petitions from the employees of the various media houses. And this is not a discussion we can have here, we can't complete it, but I want to invite you to think about how we professionalize our profession. You're professional in your individual capacities, but by what I mean is that can we have an arrangement similar to Uganda Law Society? Acceptable without appearing to defend the soldiers, they operate under the same stress as you people. You have deadlines to keep, they have a country to keep secure. But that's not a defense for their actions. I'm just pointing out that we all have our various challenges that in some occasions may lead us to take actions that are not acceptable. And I hope that forms, you can regard that as an apology from us, and we are committed to work even better with the media because of the role that you play, which role is to inform and also to empower. I did not know much about environment, I must confess, until I read General Tenywa's articles. But if you had asked me to go and buy something on the environment, probably I would not. There are so many things that you do as a fraternity, in tourism, in all manners of things that you bring on our phones, or even in front of us on the screen or in form of a paper, that would have otherwise not have known had it not to be for your profession. So in that respect, we celebrate what you do, and like I said, we are committed to a cordial relationship. With those remarks, Mr. Chair and the distinguished guests up here, I want to thank you all for organizing this event, and we look forward to more of these, and indeed to collaborate with the media in a more productive and constructive way. I thank you very much.
Thank you, our guest of honor. You have highlighted a couple of issues. There is a tweet that comes from Avatar, Uganda. He says, that said, Mr. PS, can we have a football match of journalists, reporters, and the platoon of UPDF, not bosses and superiors? That Avatar have alluded and have laid it here. In the interest of time, let me request the journalists who received the certificates to come and have a photography moment with the guest of honor before he leaves and before the representatives here leave. All journalists, please, in a snappy way because of time. Let's make it in a snappy way. Ali Mivule, Jocelyn, Mildred, Chivumbi. Let's have a picture moment. Our next session is going to be a panel. Who is Chivumbi? In a snappy way. Faster, faster, faster. Ali Mivule. Faster. Congratulations to all of you. You've really made us proud. And on such a day as we're celebrating 30 years of this very event, we want to say that we are very proud of you. Jocelyn, your certificate, please. It's, oh, thank you. Okay. That's it. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, allow me relieve my guests to take the seats on this other side. As I welcome my brother Odonga to take up the next section. I understand time has really gone, but we're going to work within the time.
Okay, I can do 45.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew Chamagero, my colleague. Thanks a lot, the UN representative, the PS. Thanks a lot to the other journalists. We are going to have a 45 minutes panel discussion, really chewing over the theme of the day. The theme is information as a public good, and the discussion is on World Press Freedom Day. May I now take the opportunity to invite the following persons who are going to form part of the panel. Mr. Joshua Chalimpa. Joshua Chalimpa is the Chair Board of Trustees of the Uganda Journalists Association, and is also a member of the East South Africa Media Group. You're most welcome, Joshua. Following Joshua is a young man who I admire as well. He is the mediapreneur for training, and he started and founded the Media Challenge Initiative, and a few years ago he was personally mentioned by none other than President Barack Obama as one of the young persons doing amazing work to promote media freedom through training and mentorship. Fellow journalists, join me in welcoming Mr. Puli Abbas Mpindi to the panel. The next panel member is a gentleman who has seen it all as far as media is concerned. He has practiced journalism, writing, reporting from the days of the Crusader and until when it folded. He has taught journalism at Makerere University School of Mass Communication. He rose through the ranks and became the head of mass communication training in Uganda at Makerere University Mass Communication Department. He is currently leading the Uganda Media Sector Working Group. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Dr. George William Lugalambi to the panel. Next, we will have a gentleman who speaks for government in other quarters, but is mainly concerned with policy issues and ensuring that media freedom is respected and promoted in the country by government honoring its commitments, one of which has just been reiterated by the PS here. Allow me introduce and invite the Principal Communications Officer, Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, Mr. Mwinganisa Pius. Finally, I know it may not be the best ratio, but nonetheless, there is a start from somewhere. We will appreciate it. The lady on the team, she is the Senior Human Rights Officer and Editor of the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to receive Ms. Rosemary Kemigisha. Launch the questions as good as I should. Let me start with the question of, we are going to be looking a lot at the challenge, and one of the things that comes to mind when we celebrate this day is the issue of capacity, the issue of literacy. And Dr. Lugalambi, I want to start with you. You do the training, you do the mentorship at university and cross-cutting in other fora. I need you to give us a sense of what, in your view currently, as far as media literacy is, across the country. How is Uganda faring? People have talked about the need for training and all this. Where are we standing as Uganda in terms of media literacy? Dr. Lugalambi. Sorry about that.
Right. Well, thank you, Charles. So talking about media literacy, I think the missing link, in my view, is the news consumer. Because I think we tend to talk about media literacy. When we talk about media literacy, I think the question is, whose literacy is it? Are we talking about? Who is the subject of the literacy that we are talking about? And in my view, it's really the news consumer that should be really the focus when we talk about media literacy. And even bringing it even further down to the lower level, or rather than talking about, media literacy in those very broad terms, to talk specifically about news literacy, because I think that is really where we are having the challenges. I think people are quite competent in terms of, their skills for using media. You look across the generations, the younger generation, the older generations, if you look at many different, age brackets, competencies in terms of how to access the media, how to use these platforms, I don't think there is much of a problem there. In my view, I think the problem of competence is about judgments, about that thing we call news. What exactly, the judgments that people make about, how to access news, how to evaluate news, how to evaluate information. And specifically, and we're not even talking about any information, but we're talking about the core information of news, which is verified information. And again, I would argue that we still also need to even narrow it down further. If you're talking about information, what kind of information are we talking about? We should be talking about verified information, because verified information is what really news and journalism are about.
Good. Maybe a follow-up to that. In terms of the capacity of the journalists that we have today, because people are talking about the age of fake news, internet and all this kind of thing, posing a challenge and making competition so stiff for what they call legacy media, or the old kind of newspaper, radio, TV. Where are we at, and how do you see it shaping up in the years to come?
I think the challenge for the media is, I think, the tendency to really pander to audience tests. And I think the reason training is very important in terms of journalists really understanding their responsibilities and ethical obligations is really to resist that urge to pander to the audience, because the audience, people want to know all sorts of things, and usually in that rush to find, that urge, and a hunger for information and thirst for news, journalists, tend to take short circuits in response, to that particular urge. So from the media perspective, the important is to really exercise those particular restraints that we train not only, in journalism schools, but also the kind of restraints that are nurtured, in newsrooms in the course of practice, because practice and preparation in practice, in my view, is as important. In fact, it's even more important than actually the exposure that a journalist gets in the training.
Thank you so much. Let me come to a new kid on the block. Mr. Apuli, you do training, you do mentorship, and the theme, this is a very fundamental theme, information as a public good, or if you like, you can turn it around and say journalism as a public good. Now, people have started asking in this age, what is the role, if it is a public good, what is the role of the public in creating good journalism? Where do you see it from?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think picking up from the doctor's point of if you don't have an audience that is literate, there is struggle on how they can be involved in creating content that will end up on the media platforms. So you have to come from a point of how prepared is our audiences for the content that we produce, and also looking at the fact that there are different platforms online that they can consume from. So we need to think about media literacy at all levels to make sure that, one, the audience is involved. So, for example, the PS was talking about there are 7 million smartphone users, and you have the whole population, rest of the population who are not on smartphones. And the question is, how are we reaching to that kind of population, and how are they taking or participating in the content that ends up on TV and radio? So that will be my input on that.
There are people who think that the business model of, again, following up on that and the theme of journalism or information being a public good, there are some people who think that the business model of journalism earning, or newspapers, radios, TVs earning up to beyond 60%, 80, 90% is changing and dying off. In your view, how do you think the media today should position itself, to survive the rigors or the challenges of the economic market?
Thank you. Of course, you're looking at the question that everyone is asking about media sustainability and how newsrooms can keep, the lights on. So they're a combination of ideas. I don't run a media house, so I may not be in position to prescribe solutions, but they're a combination of things. If you're looking at the landscape, they are giant internet giants like Google and others that are taking over the eyeballs, and that means a lot of advertisement is moving on the internet. So the question is, are our media houses creating innovations to take advantage of the digital spaces or the digital dollars, or are they looking at other opportunities? If we are talking about 7 million subscribers or 7 million smartphone users, who is serving the other audience, and how are we tapping into the revenues that come from the other audiences? So we might think maybe these people who don't have smartphones don't have the money to contribute, but we've seen in other countries where people are doing community media and they're able to survive and work with funds that are coming from the public. So I think it's really thinking across within your media house itself, how are you empowering your journalists, and even to have sort of like a desk that thinks critically about the business inside the media house, looking at the new trends, looking at the numbers, because the numbers themselves don't lie. And if you think about who you're serving, I've seen people who are now investing in niche markets. So how are you tapping into the health space, and how are you producing content that serve those communities? There is also rural journalism, for example, as a niche. How do we make money out of those spaces? So I think for me, it's really dedicating a team in place that thinks in terms of innovations, to think not just about the content itself, because we say content is king, but also the business that runs the content.
Wow. Thanks a lot. Brilliant, brilliant. Joshua, let me come to you on aspects of media freedom. Abbas refers to the freedom to do cross-cutting innovations. You can do health, you can do rural journalism and all that. And that brings to a thinking so many things, including, the extent to which we have freedom to do that. You were, most importantly, a president of UJA, the Uganda Journalists Association, the biggest association of journalists in this country. Do you think that there is that space to practice journalism to its best, creatively, innovatively, that we have in Uganda today?
Thank you, Charles. And I want to congratulate the journalists for this very important day for us. I'll just start from a story. About 10 years ago, with support from the German government, there was a partnership between African journalists and journalists from Eastern Europe. And here, the African journalists were doing peering with the journalists from Eastern Europe. At that stage, the journalists from Africa, the freedom in Africa and the development of journalism was quite higher compared to what was in Eastern Europe. I want to state that 10 years on, we've seen progress in journalism development in Eastern Europe countries as compared to journalism on the African bloc. And I'll talk about why this is possible. When we are doing that training, when we were training journalists from Eastern Europe at a meeting in Sweden, we launched the East and South Media Group. The idea was to try compare notes as we go on, what is happening. I want to tell you that Eastern Europe, which was looking to Africa to learn lessons, is actually moving fast. At that time, when we had that meeting, there were a number of laws in Uganda, which were quite progressive laws, pieces of legislation. We were only battling with one law, which was the Press and Journalism Statute, which the minister, the PS alluded to here, especially on the issue of the formation of NIJU, where the journalists were saying that it shouldn't be the business of government to create an association for which journalists are obliged to belong. And that's why the NIJU died in its infancy. Now, in terms of press freedom in this country, and going back to the history of where it started, when the 1995 Constitution was promulgated, at that time, the spirit, because I'm going to talk about the issue of will, of goodwill, because what is lacking in Uganda may not be the laws per se. What we are seeing as journalists being brutalized, it is an issue of the will. Is the government willing to put into place...
Whose will?
I mean, I'm talking about government, in terms of government, because there's been a lot of talk, especially on the issue of whether there is a lot of freedom in Uganda, and therefore the journalists are abusing it. That has been a talk which has been growing. And I want to tell you that apart from what we are looking at in terms of government, we have also to look at the media itself and its ability to retain its base. Because now you have a breed of very young journalists. It is not that the old journalists of our age have died. No, they are there, but because of the circumstances we are living in, there is a high attrition rate that the journalists are moving on, leaving the profession to the young. It's good to have young people, but we need to have a fusion of the old generation of journalists such that they can learn from each other for the development of this profession. Now, the other one is the COVID situation has actually made the situation even worse. We are seeing that many media houses that we knew that had the financial muscle were even the first to talk of possibilities of retrenching, of cutting down on expenses, on issue of generating content. And as a result, you have the papers, but you may not have the content. So even what the Constitution talks about, the freedom of expression as in Article 29, even the issues of access to information as in Article 41, may not arise if you have a weak media. We need to have stronger media in order to be able to talk about the freedoms that we are talking about. And once those are not in place, then we have a problem that we have to grapple with. And I want to call upon the members of the media fraternity. I also want to call upon different partners to help the media in coming out of this ditch, because We are seeing that the stagnation in terms of newspapers, that the content vis-a-vis advertising in the newspapers is reducing. Okay. So you have a shell of paper, you don't have content. Okay. So even when Dr. Lugalambi trains the journalists at the university, what are the chances that the journalists that have been trained will actually go out in the field and practice what they have been told? You will have a situation where people are living. I remember Dr. Lugalambi, when he was chairperson of, we worked together in Article 29 Coalition. One of the issues we are looking at, and here we invited the Ghana National Media Commission to come and we learn from them how Ghana has been able to make it. And when we invited Ambassador Amihere then, who was the chairperson of the Ghana Media Commission, one of the issues that we are looking at was to create a hybrid where you have, you don't make the professional association such as Uja to die, but you can work with them under a commission which is representative of all. Now, once the government takes over the issue of regulation, that's where we lose it. So okay. I want to think that there is a will from okay. all partners, because we want to develop the media, but we have to come together both as the media and the state to look at what works for Uganda.
Okay. On that note, I need to bring in Pius. Pius, you had a stint at the Media Council, which provides us with some good insights from your side. There is a lot of discussion going on this topic of whether or not journalism in Uganda or information can be made a public good. Indeed, it is supposed to be, but that reality or that supposition means that there must be certain things done. The question of funding and all this. Now you see the question of training, and my colleague Andrew earlier said there is need to, or the PS actually said there is also need to train the forces as well. But that brings in the major animal in the room, the question of funding. Do you think that we should, amidst now the COVID difficulties, leave journalism to the private market to drive the agenda, to drive the content, to commercialize, or there is need for indeed government to come up as the depository of public interest and say we shall put funding in the media generally? How it is divided, how it is distributed is another question, but that on principle there should be government funding. What do you think about that?
Sorry, I apologize. I'll move this to speak clearly. Your question is even very long. You allow me to speak a little more.
Or the mask was interrupting you.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you. Now, thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you well phrased it, I'd like us to raise this discussion maybe a little higher, the level a little higher. And you brought it out clearly about information being a public good. A public good, from the very fundamentals, it's something that should be accessible by many people and without competition of financial, or should be something easily accessible.
Without any impediment.
Without any impediment. And when you look at information, you are realizing, and you're right, information is clearly coming out clearly as a public good because of the convergence of the technologies and also with the information, how it's coming out with the journalists. Now, for me, the idea is that I'd like to look at it in two dimensions. One is that when you talk about a public good, one is to look at, we should be looking at investment. And I would like to invite the journalists to engage the permanent secretary raised here. You raise the discussion to how much investment in bigger projects, which actually come to this. And also look at it as an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. Media does not stand alone. The technology is not standing alone, but all this interplay. So the question is, how much leverage are you having? For example, we are seated here in a hub. It's called an ICT hub. Basically, look at innovations. If you look at, can we have some bigger projects? I've been to Egypt, for example. You have like a film industry, for example, a whole city on film. But now, because of the convergence, the journalist, the filmmaker, that's where content comes in. And that's where money comes in. And that's how you engage government to put money really into this industry. And that's the discussion we should have. And also, I'd like to mention something on the second aspect, is on the literacy bit. I want us to look at it more critically. Literacy is not this basic literacy. Information literacy is look at critical thinking and analysis, evaluation. It's not only, as Doctor said, it's not only the consumer. Actually, with this flood of information, it's like you're in a forest. So much information is coming in. The consumer cannot even sort. You who is the editor, how much are you sorting the information and what levels are you using? Then it comes to the aspect of ethical issues. Balance the value systems we use in media. When you're doing the training, these are two aspects you should look at also. And for me, let's look at the critical thinking about the ethics. Where's the root? Because thinking, we have to think in terms of, we usually call it a paradigm shift, or think the way we think. I would like to make it simple. Whenever you look at the tree, we usually see the branches and that's how we see information flowing. But if you are going to do critical thinking, you have to change the tree upside down. Look at, it's like turning your head upside down. Actually, change your thinking. Look at the roots when the leaves are down. What are we looking at? From the basics of ethics, the roots are into faith beliefs. I was looking at something like, for example, like whether you're Muslim or Christian. The church was, at one time, the Catholic Church was looking at this issue of the technologies. In the 1960s, when we were having independence, they were writing the Vatican Council too. And they looked at these new technologies, these new changes. How are they affecting the people? Human beings are developing to make their lives better. But how are they relating? And there's something they pointed out, that the more you have this power, the bigger the scope of your responsibility. This is both for the government and the media. So it's good we are having this debate now. We should be thinking about co-regulation, both the industry and the government. It cannot be one person. It's becoming bigger. The scope is wider. That's how I'd like us to have this kind of engagement at this rate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pius. Interesting insights there. Let me bring in the officer from the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Madam Kemigisha, you deal with one of the animals in the room also this year as we celebrate or commemorate World Press Freedom Day, is along the issue of freedom, is the issue of now violence and many reported ills against journalists. And your organization deals with a day-to-day basis. How do you think this should be resolved between the journalists and the media fraternity?
Thank you very much, Charles. And let me also congratulate the fraternity on this big day. Thank you for the question, but let me first put some context to the question. Whenever we are in trust, as media people, we hold in trust freedom of expression of all citizens. So freedom of speech and expression of all the citizens, then there is a challenge, there is a problem. We're talking about when we are talking about public good. I will take this a notch higher from what Pius said. For me, let me use the example of security. It's not stated in our constitution that security is a public good. But we all know, as far as security are given priority attention, we even know that the private players in security are regulated effectively. So why can't this happen when we are talking about information? Now, in terms of human rights, public information is important for the empowerment of the citizen. We are not talking about quantity of information. We have that. The internet has brought us the forest, like he said. But we are talking about that quality information that empowers the citizen to make informed decisions, to participate in governance, to participate in public affairs. As a journalist, when you are doing your work, are you looking at how empowering or disempowering? Are you looking at what you are doing as something that is going to bring value to the citizen, to the citizen's freedom of expression? So if for us in the human rights world, we look at public information in a holistic context. That's why when we are looking at the challenges that we have, including safety of journalists, which Charles has asked me, it is because they impact, for example, brutality of journalists impact on the channel that brings this empowering information to the citizen.
Grab yourself an ice-cold bottle of Mirinda Orange at any shop or supermarket near you. Mirinda Orange, the taste that makes you go ORNG.
Program guide.
Within the industry itself. So the challenges come from all the aspects, all the stakeholders that are in the information sector. Okay. So I would really like that after today, government and the other stakeholders can start looking at public information. The way security is sacred in this country, so that we can protect not just media freedom, because media freedom is just an aspect, as I've explained, but we can protect the rights of citizens to information, to expression, to participation. You know, rights are interrelated. So if you affect one right, you affect the others.
Thanks. Let me swing this same debate to, you have raised very interesting perspectives there. Dr. Lugalambi, would you be comfortable with having the taxpayer or the taxpayer's money being budgeted towards media work? Would you, to what extent would you be comfortable with that arrangement or proposal?
Yes, I definitely would, because first, it depends on really how you present it to the public. Because if you present it as an information subsidy, you know, and there are very many forms of information subsidies. data, the taxes on data, or waiving taxes on data. All those are forms of information subsidies. On the understanding that information is so central, to functional citizenship. The whole notion of citizenship is really about being able to access information and being able to use, information in a constructive way to be able to make judgments about your day-to-day life in all different aspects of public life, whether in politics or you're making, economic decisions or consumer decisions. So we all know very well that we depend on information, and we need quality information, as Rose says. We need quality information to be able to make these judgments, to be able to exercise our rights in terms of, exercising our political preferences, our economic preferences, consumer preferences, in all these domains of our lives. So I think it very much depends on how you present it to the public, and demonstrating actually that those sorts of information subsidies in terms of investing public resources such as taxes through our fiscal policies, because and of course we are, in many ways we are attempting to do that. For instance, if you talk about the tax on data, and the government now says that for purposes of education, there will be, that tax will not apply, leave alone the practical question of how you actually are going to execute to be able to actually, distinguish between my usage of data for educational purposes and for entertainment purposes. So there is that practical question, but I think we in many different ways, these information subsidies are already there. I think it's a question now of defining, what particular function we want to apply to be able actually to present, these subsidies in forms of tax waivers and so on and so forth to the citizen, to be able to understand that the value they derive from accessing quality, verified information, for them to function effectively as citizens requires investment, investing, the tax money.
Just a second to keep on with that before I bring in your other colleagues. And when you get the microphone now at this point, feel free. We are left with about 15 minutes. Feel free to ask so that you can contribute. But just 30 seconds with Dr. Lugalambi. I wanted to find out, is there any country we can talk about whose lesson looks plausible to study in this kind of arrangement, the public, apart from the UK's BBC model?
Yes, I think the Nordic countries, or the Scandinavian countries, the Swedens, the Norways, they have a long tradition of investing in public media. So, there are things like media development funds, for instance, that are funded by the taxpayer, where money goes into fund, and there is a rational, independent mechanism managed independently, for distributing this money across, media enterprises, and because that's the kind of money that actually funds, the kinds of innovations that Abbas is talking about that you really need to see, happening. So I think, depending, it's something that we can structure and have a good discussion from a policy point of view about how we can structure this system of providing information subsidies, and we can discuss actually what specific ones and what purpose, actually.
Thank you so much. Joshua is intent on making a point. Joshua, 1 minute, and then Pius, and then I come back to Rosemary and Abbas.
Thank you very much. The issue of information as a public good is one of the areas I've taken interest in. In fact, when I was president of Uganda General Association, I had brought this discussion even to the level of UCC. And one of the models we are trying to copy is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is a US agency. Now, the issue here is that the government talks about the infrastructure that has been put. And for us, the argument has been, you may have the infrastructure, but the infrastructure may be useless if you have no content put on. Yeah. Now, the model of Corporation for Public Broadcasting of USA works in a way that if, for example, a media house is interested in developing a program, And that program is for the good of the public. It could be a health program, it could be an environmental program. Some of the programs, in terms of audiences, the commercial owner, the owner of a media house may not have a lot of interest in investing in environmental journalism because it may not attract audiences. And here, we are looking at programs, that's why we are going for music. Now, I was even worried that if they put in place the international copyright organization requirements, because the international corporate authorities are coming in Uganda to try and make Uganda sign to the international copyright organization, wherein even playing music, which has been the cheapest form of programming you can have, you will be obliged to pay a copyright to the person who composed the song. It means that if you play Bobby Wine's song 10 times, you pay royalties to Bobby Wine who composed that song. That is the requirement of the International Copyright Organization. That's why we are saying people had gone to music because it was cheap. Now, once they have to pay for it, it means they will have no content that they can get free. It means, therefore, that government has to invest in the development of content that can be run on the media channels that we have had. Okay. For me, I believe that we are ripe for such an arrangement.
Thank you. Let's have Pius. Pius, if we were to go this model, how would it work? You gave a brilliant, you gave a brilliant example of a public good being like health, that government invests in with our money that we pay. That must be underlined, by the way, that we are not begging for this money, that this is taxpayers' money we are talking about. Education, now with COVID, you can't study physically, so you have to go online. Then, of course, you gave example of security. So what model would you want it to take shape of?
Before we come to the model, Sir Charles, one is we have to look deeply. When you look about, I think you mentioned, this is why investing about content and how these people are interested and how the markets are going.
Yeah.
First of all, we have to look at the background where you're coming from. From the training or even the kind of media industry we have in Uganda. First of all, we have a training which is on learning, which is based on two models. And yet now with the technology, you have to have multiple models of learning, look at information in that respect. And that's how we usually look at, I hear something, I know. That's the teaching. When you're using audio, or this teaching in class, that's cognition. If you look at another aspect, you say, I see, I remember, memory, which basically academics are emphasizing. We are churning out all these journalists, all these medias, basically that's what they are based on. They forget one other aspect, which is to do, I understand. Meaning you put your hands in the pie, you cook it and taste the pie. This journalist who is coming from doctor should be also, partly his marking, should consider the continuing practice perspective when you are going to mark
the practical skills.
Practical skills. Then you'll have the aspect of content that is applicable and you can compete in the market. So, to come back to the model, I think it has to be multi-pronged. And it's good we're having this discussion. I don't use an illustration, an example, if you allow me some little time. I think Rosemary raised something about enabling information. Information that is for decision making.
Yeah.
That's information that actually which can be valid on the market.
Yeah.
Eh? How do you come to this?
Actually, someone in another discussion on the same theme said it should not just be information as a public good, but relevant information.
Yeah, I wanted to give an example, an illustration. Sometime back, I was with they call it Enable under the German organization. They are doing some training. Mm-hmm. And they are training teachers, trainers of teachers. These are training institutions.
Yeah.
And they are talking about what's the point of teaching somebody that is an academician, who is a teacher of mathematics. And you pay for his training to increase his capacity in apple growing. From the communication perspective, it's very, very relevant that actually this mathematics They have trained 50 teachers.
Okay.
I want to see how applicable they are in the industry.
Okay.
Thank
Good. It's the most appropriate time to bring in Abbas. Abbas, as a trainer, what would be the most appropriate training to produce a journalist who produces relevant information which is worth calling a public good?
I think, one, to tap into that, we have to make a business case for journalism. Because the question is, why should we have more investment? And I was talking to a South African friend of mine who told me there is a correlation between storytelling and development of a nation. And for example, organizations or startups that get their stories told in the media kind of begin to find more opportunities and funding. So, and over the years, you realize that those organizations or startups stay in the market more than those that don't get, media attention. And that's why, in terms of training, how do our young journalists understand the business case of journalism and media itself, so that when you get into the media space, you know where you're coming from to report what you're reporting about. But then it also has to be, multidisciplinary in a way that whatever we are discussing here, there is a role to be played by each and every actor. So what is the role of the government in terms of infrastructure and making sure that policies are in place to make sure that this animal we are talking about, press freedom, is realized? What is the role of the media houses in terms of what Madame here was talking about? Are we journalists the biggest threat to journalism or press freedom in the way of how we conduct, how we produce stories, but also we're looking at many, many cases where we're hiding information that should be public good. So how do we also now train our journalists to be able to be a solution themselves to the challenge, especially on sustainability and economic issues of the media industry? So for me, it's really, really important that we begin to see how important the media is, or journalists are, in changing the world or changing our communities and our country. And once we realize that, the willingness that he's talking about, I know that there is knowledge and awareness of media and journalism is very important in the development and democracy of a country. But are we really wired to actually invest into that? And for me, I think it's coming from how do we make a business case for that and make sure that even inside, for example, media houses, we can talk about, reducing your team to the one that you can manage, but have you done a core analysis of your business inside to see what new trends am I playing with and how am I moving forward to make sure that my business can survive?
Thanks a lot, Abbas. Let's have Rosemary. Brilliant point, brilliant point. Rosemary, we are left with 5 minutes, and I am tempted to give each of you now 1 minute for you to make a case for the kind of model you would want to see, and then make a wrap-up on way forward going the next 1 year, how journalists and government can ensure that the violence, reported cases of beatings, torture, even now reported killings are minimized.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm not going to propose a model because there are several models, and I believe that as Ugandans, we need to find a middle point or something that is applicable to our situation. But I know, generally speaking, that George has talked about subsidies. I saw in Sweden where public funds are given to private media houses for public service information. We have state media here. Why can't we start with that? Why can't the government strengthen state media so that they can compete favorably with the private media that we have already? That can be one step.
Okay.
2, how can we protect information from being swallowed by business interests, economic interests? Because the businessman who puts in their money, and as Uganda Human Rights Commission, we have had engagements, we have had dialogues, we have benefited from some people's researches. We have discovered actually that the people that invest in media industry, their ultimate objective is the profit, just like any business person. So the media person is regarded just as another input,
Okay.
and which can be made away with. So we have economic issues, we have political issues, political interference. We have Charles, we have community media that are actually struggling to play the role of bringing information as a public good.
Okay.
They actually operate.
Way forward now. Time.
Going forward, I think we need
violence,
a comprehensive strategy, and the Uganda Human Rights Commission has a policy brief. We are advocating policy change, and in due course, maybe sooner than later, we would like to present this policy brief to Parliament, to government, on how actually this was taken out of our mouth, on how to make information a public good.
Thank you
because
so
it's a
much.
right.
Thank you so much. Abbas, unfortunately, we have to do now 30 seconds each. So way forward on the violence meted out against journalists by different persons, especially some persons in security.
I have a radical one. I think that World Press Freedom Day could be a public holiday so that we don't go to work. And I think by that, maybe that can
From
help.
next year?
From next year. And maybe
Okay.
that can help the public to understand how important the media is. And we can use the time to get out of our offices and reflect on how to improve media and journalism. And in relation to the violence, I think that for each and every security person out there, you need to put yourself in the shoes of journalists. They are not your enemies.
Okay.
They are just trying to tell a story, and I don't think we should be shooting messengers.
Thank you so much, Abbas. Thank you. Joshua, 30 seconds. Going forward, violence against journalists.
Thank you very much. Uganda is part of the UN system. There is the UN plan of action on the safety of journalists. It is supposed to be domesticated here such that we put in place mechanisms for the safety of journalists. But on the issue of...
By the time you're running to the UN, does it mean we have failed locally to solve our problem, our
No,
challenges?
we haven't failed, but I'm just saying that it's not just about playing football with the army. It is about putting in place a system that will help such that once issues like that crop up, there is where you can go for a remedy. Now, for now, we don't have such a system.
Okay.
But also what we have to look at is the role of the public, because we have talked about government, we have talked about others, but in other systems, for example, we're talking about community stations, community radio stations. The community radio stations here are surviving thanks to donations from elsewhere, from public from elsewhere. The Ugandans have not seen the need to support their own media. So on the issue of funding, finally, I want to propose that there are mechanisms here. For example, the UCC has a communication fund. We can make use of the communication fund, also fund content in this country. What is happening now is not being used. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshua Chalimpa. Dr. Lugalambi, 30 seconds on the violence now.
Yes. I think you have to get to the root of this problem, which in my view is the culture of impunity. You have to get to that root through education, but also through implementing sanctions and serious sanctions against the perpetrators of this violence against the media.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thanks a lot. Finally, Pius, on violence, way forward, how can it be minimized? Resolution.
Thank you, Charles. I'd say we need to have a triangulation between the policymakers, the academia, and the practitioners. That is, we are all working, almost operating in separate ways. The three have to work together. we need to increase on that, and also to start dropping co-regulation for both the state and the practitioners. And also an aspect in terms of having some landmark projects for this ecosystem. Not to have multinationals also to try to enter the business. A public good should not be influenced by either multinational company, either it's a Facebook or Yahoo or Google or what. It should be a public good for the people. So also this needs to be, we have to have plan, a strategic plan with landmark projects in this industry. And it's good we take on the invitation that the permanent secretary offered here. The general should go on a round table and propose this in the sector development. Right now the government is trying to develop a sector plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Pius, for Dr. Lugalambe, Joshua Chalimpa, Abbas, and Kemi Gisha. Thanks a lot, and to you, the audience out there. I also want to thank Jim Okun Makari, Sales Manager of Jubilee Life Insurance, who has been part of the supporting team from behind, the scenes to this day. I want to thank all of you, and especially to those who are out online. If you want to follow this discussion, the day is still going on. You can follow from hashtag World Press Freedom Day, hashtag full word, no breaks in between, World Press Freedom Day, and also hashtag Stand Up for Human Rights, hashtag Stand Up for Human Rights. The 4 is the figure, right? It is the word is written as a figure. So stand up for human rights, hashtag, and continue the discussion online and join in and, put in your thoughts. Otherwise, thanks so much. I'm now going to hand you back to my colleague, Andrew Chamagero. Thanks, and God bless you all.
Once again, let's give a round of applause to our panelists. I love the submission when we started to talk business, where the journalist gets to understand the business model, how we earn as an entity. I think once we understand how we earn, we can be in position then to advocate for more salaries. So to the business owners from the media and Media Owners Association, this is a conversation we need to take up. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that this could bring us to the end of our conversation today, but the ongoing conversation is still online. I understand a couple of journalists across the globe are following this conversation. Media freedoms, new economic challenges, and let me put this to the faces of our bosses as we're still live. We need equipments that can compete globally. Let's clap for that, those who understand.